The oncoming ship shouldn't spend the next 2 hours trying to figure out where they're at. Okay, you're going to run into ground. You're going to break something. So I need to know where I'm at, and I go after bad actors first. I use that because that helps me explain that skill and to build that equipment, that care plan. Part of that care plan I didn't even get to is, does the operator have expectations? Can they troubleshoot? Can they help us? Can they write a good work order? And that good work order shouldn't be fix the light bulb. My fear around the whole AI is that I really don't want the AI making real decisions without a human interface.
Welcome to the Connected Shopfloor Podcast, where we explore real stories and big ideas that keep the factory floor buzzing.
Today I'm joined by Bob Moak, Senior Project Manager at Efeso Management Consultants. Bob served 22 years in the Navy and then moved into the industrial world, where he worked his way up to plant superintendent. He later on transitioned into consulting and has spent more than 20 years in the field, working with names such as Celerant, Accenture, and now Efeso. Bob knows the maintenance and reliability world inside and out. And in this episode, we are touching real examples: what bad actors are, how should we identify them, and why shift changeovers are critical. Also, Bob shared his opinion on why AI must always have humans overseeing operational decisions. I hope you like this episode. I'm Marco Chan, and this is the Connected Shopfloor Podcast. Bob, you spent 22 years in the Navy before moving into the manufacturing world, right? Help me understand that. Is managing a ship crew and a production crew two sides of the same coin, or is it like completely different worlds?
It is different. And it's a very difficult transition when you separate from the military. So just for an instance, you're 22 years old, you're fresh out of college, and the Navy gives you a department. My department had 44 people. I was new to the world, and those 44, as I said, half of them were older than me, half of them were younger than me, half of them are married, all right? Half of them have been maybe divorced. Some of them had kids. I didn't have any of that life experience. And here I was supposed to be their mom, their dad, their life coach, their financial advisor. All that happened, overnight. And thankfully, I had two good chief petty officers, senior enlisted. They're very different. One was very technological or technical, and he enjoyed tearing stuff apart and showing me how it worked. And the other one didn't want me anywhere near his engineering spaces. And then when I left the active duty 5 years after, I joined industry. And again, you're thrust into a department manager role with 30 people. And yeah, you can manage a department, but I don't have that chief petty officer. I don't have that rank on my sleeve or shoulder that tells people, respect me. I've got to be a boss. I've got to earn their respect. And I don't have that chief petty officer that I had in the Navy. In the Navy, I have a problem in the morning. Chief, make this go away. And he'd resolve it by 3 that afternoon. I didn't have that in the industry. Now, if I transition into the consulting world and also in my industry world, the same thing. If I didn't know an answer, I looked back at my Navy experience, and that always helped me through it. So if there was a best practice in the Navy, I took that into industry and I took it into the consulting world. If I still don't have the answer, then I have to go and figure it out.
You already touched on this a little bit, but from my understanding, and I have zero experience there, but the Navy rules are absolute, right? So you cannot challenge them. And when you move into a shop floor or a civilian life, people like to challenge them a little bit. So do you think that factories are actually better off if they would follow more a Navy way of working?
I do. In fact, the most important meeting of the day in my world is that shift pass on, right? That shift handover. Again, let's go back to the Navy for a second, and then I'll tell you about industry. So in the Navy, as an officer of the deck, my job was to drive the ship and be safe for the ship, be safe for the crew. That was my job, and follow the captain's standing night orders. So in my preparations, I would, walk the ship from stern to the bow. I would talk to the watchstanders, regardless of what watch they were standing at, whether it was engineering watch or combat watch. I'd go talk to my lookouts. I would get complete situational awareness before I was ready to take the deck. Because once you take the deck in the Navy, it's logged. It's a legal entry. It's your ship. If you run it aground, you're the one going to jail. If you hit another ship, you're the one going to jail. So you take that responsibility very seriously. That sense is not, I haven't seen it a lot in industry. So what happens is shift change happens. The oncoming shift shouldn't spend the next 2 hours trying to figure out where they're at. Okay, you're going to run it aground. You're going to break something. So I need to know where I'm at. I've actually written an article that went on LinkedIn years ago about the importance of shift handoff. The shift handoff has to be something you start once you start your shift. So if I'm on shift for 12 hours and 10 minutes into my shift, hey, there's something really important, the next shift might need to know about it, I should write it down. Now, I might get it resolved on my shift, and that's fine, but I still like to tell them, hey, this is a problem that came up. This is how I resolved it, and we haven't seen it again. So, but the problem, again, that you see often is that people spend 15 minutes before the end of their shift putting together some notes, maybe writing a log, and then they tell the person that's coming on, this is what you need to know, and they leave. The oncoming person really has to be very active. They have to ask the questions. Hey, last time I was here, I had this problem. Did you see it again? Last time I was here, I wrote this work order. Do you know if it's been fixed? So these types of things, it has to be very engaged and a very active turnover. And I would say if industry did that better, I think they'd be more productive, more efficient. It's very old school, but it came from the Navy, and it's been worked for the Navy for hundreds of years, and they're a world-class organization. So industry could learn from that.
From what I understand, you're saying that responsibility was a crucial part in this, why people would take it so seriously, the changeover part. Do you think that that's the main reason why we are lacking that in production environments and so forth? Is that the main reason?
Maybe it is because the operator doesn't really, maybe they don't understand their role. They don't understand where the dollars are being made. So let's use a chemical plant for a moment, okay? I can put all the ingredients into a reactor. And now the reactor hopefully is all timed and it's all run by PLC and DCS. But if it's not, they still have to understand that if it's supposed to be a 2.5 hour cook, it needs to be a 2.5 hour cook, not 2 hours and 45 minutes, not 3 hours, because that's production loss. And operators, not all operators, some operators don't understand the cost of not doing it per the recipe or per the schedule. And that loss is worth dollars. They don't understand it sometimes.
Is it like the problem from management that we are not explaining to them how we're making money? Is it their own fault because they don't want to do it? They just want to focus on whatever they are doing. What can we do in order to change that?
I think it's management.
It's always management, right?
Well, it is. It goes back to that shift turnover, right? What's the expectations for the day? How many cycles should I be running through my reactor that day? If I'm supposed to run 6, then I'm running 4 and there's 2 hours left in my shift. I'm probably not going to get that 6th one in. What happened and why? When am I escalating to leadership or to the management saying, hey, there's a problem here. We're not going to get our 6 cycles in today. So yeah, they might not understand the cost of that, and they don't escalate at the right time. 2 hours into their shift, they might already realize they're not going to get 6 cycles in. Well, what do? Let's escalate it now. Let's not escalate it 2 hours before the end of our shift. So there could be some visual management component there, active management. And then the other thing I would throw in there is they should have a very standard work practices.
But you're touching there a lot on money. And from what I understand, from my experience, whenever we are within a production environment and we look at visual management board, KPIs and so forth, like dollar figures or euro figures do not appear that much. We are looking to OEE, downtime, uptime, and so forth. Do you think that that's a mistake? Should we be bringing more that KPI into financial impact to the teams?
I think the operator doesn't have a whole lot of control over the money, but they have a whole lot of control of the process. So if they understand, in a perfect world, right, assuming, raw material costs and all that other stuff, being factored in, if they just on average know that, hey, if I lose an hour's worth of production in a day, or I lose so many percent in OEE points, so how many dollars is that? It doesn't have to be exact, just has to be directionally correct. So they should at least know that. They should understand that. Some places do that, though. And I've been with a couple sites and a couple companies that let them know on a shift how much their shift made or how much their shift lost.
Seriously? Oh, that's awesome.
I've seen that before, and I like it because when we do an analysis and we can assign a value to an OEE, they may not understand. Okay, you're going to give me 2% OEE. All right, but what's that 2% worth? Oh, that 2% is worth $1 million. Yeah, I want that. Right? Oh, that 2% is worth $50,000. Well, maybe they don't want that so much. They'd rather put that money someplace else. But no, let's assign a dollar value to that OEE percentage.
I love the OEE metric, but it took me, even so it's a simple one, it took me a while to fully grasp the potential of it. And I think if we would somehow change it into something that we all know that it's money, and we all would know in the end of the day how much we made, how much we lost, and so forth, I think that would be an awesome gamification of the whole system, right? You could understand very easily what's happening. But sometimes to break those KPI trees into the small line and understand, how much that line is impacting the whole organization, it's hard. But if you master that, then you're really controlling your production environment, right?
Right. In fact, my best OE story, I got to jump out for a second and tell you this quick story. I was at a chemical plant here in North Carolina, and the production manager was showing me during the analysis all of his metrics. And we got to OEE, and he had just reported that day 113% OEE. And I kind of laughed and chuckled. And I challenged him on it. And he says, well, here, let me show you my history of my OEE. And over the last week, let's just say it was over 100%. And I remember he was so proud of his OEE percentage. And I said, you can't be over 100%. There's just no way. So I said, give me a couple days. Let me figure it out. And I didn't really have a whole knowledge of his process, but just, back of the napkin type of calculation, I came up with about a 61 or 62% OEE. And I said, this is where you're at. Based on these assumptions, this is where I think you're at. And I said, I got to get some more data and really understand it. But he nearly broke down in tears. I can't show that to my boss. They'll fire me. And I'll say, did your volume change?
No, not at all.
Your volume didn't change. So all it's changed is how you're measuring your productivity. So I said, if we look at that 62%, there's 38% we can go after. There's 38% opportunity out there. At 113%, there's no opportunity. You can't justify it. So I said, tomorrow when you report your OE number, they all question the 60-something percent. Say, hey, but our volume didn't change. We're just going to measure it differently because we're going to look for opportunities to improve, to make more. And he became a disciple of OEE that day after he had his little tantrum, but it was good. and we still talk on LinkedIn from time to time. So it's all good.
No, it's an amazing story. But then circling back a little bit to what you said in the beginning is like when you were in the Navy, you had that immediate respect for the position you were in. And then whenever you enter production sites, you need to earn it a little bit, either by having, the title or also by having, the relationship with the team. But as a consultant, isn't that even harder? Do you think that consultants are given the authority they need in order to drive change? They are changing the way of working and so forth, but do they have the authority in order to do that?
I've been to different industries. With you, we were in food, we were in chocolate. I've been to oil and gas, I've been to steel, paper, mining, some other food industries, and chemicals. But I'm not an expert anywhere. I'm not. But I know how to do analysis. And yeah, we may be those consultants that show up and we don't know anything. Okay. But if you know analysis, you can get in there and start digging around and trying to understand. That's why I say having that knowledge of production loss and getting into that data and looking for it. And then asking those questions and be very targeted and specific. Say, hey, on this day, I noticed your production was really low. I saw a couple of these other factors. What happened? Am I looking at the right thing? And then you can start keying in on those opportunities. And I think if you could start talking to them in their language, talk to the client in their language, talk to the client really specific to their process, you can get some credibility. And then they'll hear what you have to say. They'll listen. I'm not one of those consultants going to say, oh, I've been in consulting 20 years and I've seen this 100 times. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, yeah, okay, I've been in consulting for 20 years. Great. But what I'm seeing here in your site is here's the opportunity. Okay. If I'm wrong, that's fine. I've only been here for a week. But this is where I'm seeing the opportunity is. More times than not, you're already halfway there. And once you start, if you can build that credibility of their process and an understanding of their job, you get over that consultant thing, because you really need to be a partner with them. It can't be an us them. So be a partner with them.
Yeah, I understand that. But something that you also have to do is to tell them that their baby is ugly, right? You have to criticize them.
You do, but you can't tell them their baby is ugly. You got to be specific about where it's ugly and why it's ugly. It's funny that you said that. You have to have that hard discussion with them, and it's okay. In fact, going back to the Navy days, the chief, he would take off his collar device. I could take off my collar device. We'd go behind closed doors, and we could just yell it out a little bit, okay. But we'd open up the door, we'd put our collar devices back on. He was chief, I was sir, and life was good again. If you can get that relationship with a client where you're both coming, because you're both coming to you both want the same thing. You both want the best for that company. I'm not saying yell at the client. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just saying you have to have that harsh discussion with them and say, hey, here's your opportunity. I can show you other places where we've installed this. I can show you more data. I can benchmark something for you. I don't really like using benchmarks so much because everybody's so unique. Yeah. But, just getting them in that right direction, getting them thinking that way. You got to be that way. One of my consultant friends told me, he said, a good friend will tell you have bad breath. And I looked at him. and I really didn't understand that, but it's true. Other people will just deal with it, but no, let me know. I'll go fix the problem. So you have to have that type of honesty with your client. Yeah.
I know. I understand that. And it's a tough relationship or tough moment to manage. But then let me go back to the military and try to compare it with my world a little bit. So I know that there's a lot of technology that has started, so a lot of innovation, including the internet. Why has been the military so effective in terms of creating innovation?
It's kind of interesting. I thought about this the other day, and I forgot the name of it, to be honest with you, but we had this LAN device. Maybe it was called LAN. I don't remember. Local Access Network or something. So I was commissioned in 1987. And I went to my first ship in 1988. At that point, we had our preventive maintenance, because you have to think about it. People don't understand what the Navy is, right? Everybody in the Navy is a firefighter. We all go through firefighting school, and we all go through the same school to learn how to fight floods, because fires and floods can ruin your day. So it doesn't matter what your rank is, you're a firefighter. The other thing is we had PMS, or the preventative maintenance system, and it was built into our LAN. So I had like CMMS before it was CMMS, right? If I needed a part, I could dissect it right there and go and see if it was in the Navy stock system. So it was almost like almost like an SAP world, right? ERP, where I've got my maintenance also attached to it, and I can go into a storeroom and I can see if the part's here. Well, I could do that on the ship back in the 80s. When I got in industry in the 90s, I didn't have that. And I thought that was weird. Like, how do we not have this stuff? I remember building PM system on cards when I got in industry, because there were certain pieces of equipment that I wanted to be maintained like we did it in the Navy. It was very reactive back then. It's still reactive too in some places, but it's gotten a lot more proactive with the PM systems. So that was one thing. Yeah, I noticed that the Navy had a leg up. The other thing is, when I started getting out of the Navy, the next thing they brought in was we already had some version of a tablet. And honestly, if I don't know what it was, but it was some version of a tablet. And I could go around and record bearing temperatures or pressures or temperatures at various spots during the engineering walkabout down the engine spaces. And then they could upload it directly into the system. It wasn't real time. It was near real time. Now today it's all real time. We're just starting to see, here we are, 2025, and I'm just 26. Yeah, 27. A year off. I'm just starting to see tablets getting out into the field. It's only been about 2 or 3 years. And operators are using them. Maintenance techs are using them. Some maintenance techs, I was at a place with another client, very high-end client, that was already starting to look at VR technology and with their mechanics. So they could go into and understand how to open up, a pump and look at how to replace it or how to fix the components within the pump, all on VR. It was pretty cool. But I've only seen that once, and they were just trialing it. Yeah.
It's incredible because when I think about, comparing it to tech world that I know a little bit more now, with the military, I see a highly structured and hierarchical way of working compared with tech companies where, we are encouraged to give people time whenever they want to work. They have to find the best place to be creative and productive. So it's like completely different ways of managing a team in order to bring innovation in. So where do you think that innovation really comes from?
Now, that's an interesting concept. Well, the military obviously has deep pockets. They can develop a lot of stuff, right? The government's driving all that. There's stuff out there that's being developed that we can't even imagine right now. But I think it's two sides of the coin here, right? Let's use GPS, for example, right? GPS, we needed it for military. That's the original purposes, right? But now, once it got out and everybody has it, we all have it on our phones now, it has been adapted for commercial use. But, back in the day, again, date myself, when we were driving a ship, we had Omega, Loran were our two navigational tools that we used, okay? And at night, we'd shoot the stars doing celestial navigation. And when I got back onto a ship in the late 90s as the executive officer of a reserve ship, nobody even knew how to do a shoot the stars. Nobody knew what I was talking about was with Loran and Charlie. It was, hey, it's GPS. And I could pinpoint myself anywhere on the globe within, 3 meters of my position. Yeah, they adapt two different ways. And I think, commercial will take it one way. I don't know really, though, if a whole lot of commercial is developed 100% from the commercial side.
Yeah, what is innovation, right? Innovation maybe is just taking something to the next step. So it's not really creating something from scratch, it's not inventing fire, right?
Correct. But like the Navy doesn't know, to get me a Domino's pizza out in the middle of the ocean. Okay. But, people want their Domino's pizza delivered right now and they want it to be delivered to their right house. So that's why I think it's adapted further, the GPS technology. Yeah.
We're talking about consultancy, Navy to consultancy, but actually that was not the direct path that you had, right? You actually went into consultancy after being in the real industry, working there in the manufacturing industry, and in a plant that actually then closed down and led you to move on to the consultancy world. Can you share a little bit that story, how that unfolded?
So when I left the Navy after 5 years of active duty, I was really fortunate. I interviewed with 3 companies and I got 3 job offers. I took the one that was closest to where I was stationed. It was closest to the ocean because I liked that stuff. And I started in the paper and pulp industry and was there for 11 years. I was with 3 different companies that got bought by 3 different companies. And in between that, 9/11 happened. I was recalled for a year of active duty. And then I went back into paper and pulp. And my last company closed down about 2 years after I got back from 9/11. And they offered me basically the same job that I had, but 60 miles away. My wife had a good job. I didn't want to move. So I called up this headhunter and I said, hey, you've been helping me to get people for my industry. Recently separated people from the military. I wanted those people to work for me. They understood how to show up on time. They understood what to wear. I mean, they took orders really well. They learned really fast. Those are the people I wanted in industry. Okay. So I called them up and I said, well, now I don't have a job. Can you help me? And he said, well, you're in luck. We're having a mixer this weekend coming up. And here are the rules. You show up, don't tell anybody you're looking for a job. Don't tell anybody your career. Just talk to them like friends, like talk about the family, talk about life, talk about your experiences, but don't talk about anything work related. Okay. And he says, and I'm going to need to have your resume. So I brought my resume to the mixer. I met this one guy and we hit it off really well. I found out that he was former Navy and we were talking and I figured he was like me. He was a guy that was looking for a job and went around the mixer, but I always kept coming back to this guy named Tim. The next morning, I had my list of interviews. And when I went to my very first interview, that was Tim on the other side of the desk. And he asked me if I could start on Monday. I said, what? He said, well, I interviewed you yesterday. Let me hire you.
From then on, you were moving from company to company to company, right? So this consulting companies were being acquired. And throughout those acquisitions, how do you actually manage that cultural change?
First 15 years of consulting, I worked for, in name, 4 different companies, but I worked with a lot of the same people. Okay. So we all had the same DNA. We had the same background. We understood how to run a project, and we ran a project. Then I got acquired by a much larger company. A company was very IT driven. I won't say anything bad about the company. I won't say anything bad about them at all. But they didn't really know how to employ consultants that want to be on the shop floor. They wanted to sell bigger and better IT solutions. And the funny thing is, 3 of my 4 years with them was, I'm going to say it, but kind of unscrew their implementations of IT. Because what's happening is they offshore a lot of their IT work and without really understanding the process. And the client, this one client, for example, they had 7 different manufacturing facilities. If you looked at the high level, they did the same thing. But once you start digging down into those sites, every one of them was very different. They're all unique, different equipment, different processes, and that one IT solution solved one, it didn't solve 7. So when they tried to install that into those other sites, what was happening was they had no control of their raw material now. They didn't have any control of where the process was. They didn't have any control of the finished goods. They knew they were producing stuff, but then they couldn't find it. So I spent about 2 years helping them rebuild their IT through understanding the process better. And then my latest company and my current company, they're a good company. I mean, there's a lot of good things there, some strengths. There's cultural stuff I'm still trying to work through. But, I like working for a company that has the client's needs. They understand the client's needs. They want to make the client successful. And that's where I want to be. I'm not there to make money. I don't care about that. I really don't. I want the client to make money. I want the client to be happy. I would like my company to be happy. And then if those 2 things are good, then I'm happy,
No, that makes sense. And you're already rich, so that's not a problem for you, Mike. I understand. Only rich people say that. So that's
no. But I think as you get older, there's more important things in the world than money.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I'd rather have time off.
Yeah, and how you spend your time is more important than anything else, right? Let me quickly thank today's sponsor, ProGrow. On this podcast, we often talk about the impact of data and AI on manufacturing sites, and something that comes up again and again is exactly the lack of data, and more importantly, the lack of clear, actionable insights. And that's exactly what ProGrow does. Trusted by more than 100 organizations, from the food and beverage industry to the automotive, covering virtually any sector of the market, ProGrow helps manufacturers get real-time insights from their machines. So visit progrow.ai and download the free app. Thank you. I was asking all about that merger and acquisition and culture that you were also describing, because when we met actually in Malaysia, and we were in charge of changing the way of working of an operational team, but we didn't even understand the language. And the culture was quite different in Malaysia than it is here in Europe, in Portugal, and also in the US. So how do you navigate that? Is it possible actually to change the way of working of a team when they don't speak the language and you're not even part of their culture?
I guess I've been, again, kind of lucky with that. I know you were more on the ground in Malaysia than I was. I was only there every 5th week. But
again, you were the boss, right? So.
It was a good project. I've had that where we operate in different areas of the world. I think what happens is if their leadership understands what we're trying to do, and that what made that successful was that we had a program. We weren't just installing it in Malaysia. We weren't just installing it in Japan or the US or Europe. We were installing it globally. So what was happening was their leaders understood that, hey, we're going to put this program in and it's working someplace else. So I think we already had the backing of the leadership that could speak the language and share, through, communicate well with their workers. So I think that was the advantage. If you went in cold, not speaking the language and trying to bring in a new program, I think that would be a little more difficult. But we didn't go in cold. We went in with a history of success at other sites, of their company. So I think that's probably what helped us there.
Now, I know, Bob, but you're also explaining to me that I think you have this bad actor example of how you started there implementing that, and you were using signs more than language. I think you have there some unique ways that you handled those challenges, right?
You remember a previous discussion we had.
Exactly.
Yeah. And in fact, it's funny that you brought that up, because that was Malaysia. So when I think about bad actors and I'm looking at bad acting equipment, let's just title, well, bad acting equipment is equipment that fails often, okay? But it also has the criteria of not only failing often, but affecting your production. And then the third thing I would say is it's a big cost, a big impact in parts and time down. So just because it fails often doesn't make it a bad actor. It could be just a nuisance, right? If it once it starts affecting your production. So the interesting thing is I have this bad actor's decision tree that I had been perfecting with a chemical company that I was working with. And then when I went to the project you and I were on, I shared it there, and I worked with the engineer there at that site in Malaysia. And I think we changed the direction of the flow, or we moved one of the decision boxes within the tree, and it got better. We improved it. And I've made a few tweaks since then, but it's basically, I would say, the Malaysia variant is the one that I still carry around, and that was 16 years ago.
Not only did you not speak the language, you were actually able to improve your current playbook.
Yeah, we drew. I remember drawing it up in his office on his whiteboard and working it through. But as far as bad actors, let me tie this other question you had brought up, right? We want to show up and we want to bring credibility. So if I'm on a maintenance work stream or if I'm supporting the maintenance work stream, one thing I want to do is go after bad actors. I want them to see that, hey, I took the time to look at their data and say, hey, I noticed that this pump, whatever it is, whatever name it is, it fails an awful lot. And when it fails an awful lot, it's costing you this much. And if you can be that pointed with them, they know that you're doing your due diligence. That you build that credibility because you're understanding their equipment.
If I would have to describe a maintenance team very quickly, it would be a firefighting team. A team that it's constantly going from crisis to crisis. And I've been having a hard time trying to explain or trying to have a plan where the team can see a path in order to be more reactive than proactive. Because they say, I don't even have time to deal with mess that I currently have here. How will I even have time to do that analysis of understanding what is my bad actor? Because that takes time and I don't have time, sir. So bug off. How do you manage that?
Well, operations has to be involved, okay, as well as your reliability, your engineering team. There's always going to be a bit of reactiveness. And I don't want to lie to a client. I'm not going to say, oh, we're going to come in, you're going to install our program, and you're never going to be reactive again. I'm a liar. I'm not going to tell them that. I want to tell them is, let's use our resources better. So everything an operator says is an emergency isn't necessarily an emergency. If I have a piece of redundant equipment that can operate in line, that's running fine, it's not an emergency. Okay? I'll get to it when I can get to it. Now, I want to do it right. I'm not trying to be flippant with that comment. We're going to get to it, but we're going to plan it properly. We're going to make sure we got the right parts, we got the right skills, and we're going to get it fixed right. But, anytime we do emergency work, you have to understand you're accepting that risk. There's a safety risk there too, right? That if I don't really plan it well, I could be putting people, at risk. Whether it's line of fire, height, confined space, doesn't matter. I could be putting people in risk. So if I can plan better, I can remove some of that risk. But the other thing is the risk of the equipment, right? And the expense of expediting costs. I remember years ago when I was in the industry, we had to basically buy a part that was in Japan. There was like six or seven of them in the world. And we basically flew it on a first class ticket to get back to our operation here in North Carolina to put it in 2 days later. And that was expensive. But that was also as I recall, that was quite important piece to have. It was probably worth that expense that we made. But I do see a lot of companies, they'll expedite equipment. There are parts that they don't even to do that for.
How do you manage that, by the way, Bob? Your CapEx versus having spare parts on your critical machines. There has to be a balance, right? Because you cannot have double your factory in terms of cost just so you have always a spare part available. How do you manage that?
I've been to very few companies that have a really good control of their critical equipment. So they haven't done that ABC analysis. And then they haven't done a risk assessment of potential failure and the cost of that failure. So they haven't really done all that. People have to understand that if you got a piece of C equipment, then why do I even have a PM program around it? Just run it to failure. Buy a new one. And I know it sounds kind of flippant to say that, but I don't want to put any time and energy into that because I'm just going to put a new one in. A equipment, well, I shouldn't have a whole lot of failure there either, but it's at a site where, they've got hundreds of thousands of dollars in just like for one piece of equipment, right? And you can't do that for every one of your A's. So there is a mix. You've got to really have to get into it. It's not an overnight fix. It's one of those things that takes a year or more.
I'm listening to you right now. I'm thinking about my plant. I'm relating with all those headaches. What do you think I should do? Like my first thing to do? I go tomorrow in the office in my factory. What's the first thing I should do?
So the first thing I do, again, and I've got this chart. I can build it. I can show it to you. But there's that short-term fix and there's the long-term fix. Okay. When we're a consulting company, I don't have time to do the long-term. It's unfortunate. I have to build the skills for them, help them build those skills. So I can use bad actors to do that. And why am I doing bad actors? So we've identified this piece of equipment as a bad actor. Well, I want to have a good care plan around that piece of equipment. So what I mean by a care plan is not only just the P&IDs and a good BOM to understand, okay? And then looking at my failure rates of what's failed. Do I have the right spare parts in-house? Do I have the right spares that would turn, right? What I mean by that is, if I know this is going to fail 4 times in a year, what's my max and min stock level for, And if I know it's going to fail 4 times in a year, can I pick it up on a PM? Is my PM optimized for that piece of equipment? So building an entire care package around that piece of equipment is going to help them understand and develop that skill. So when we start looking at our ABC critical equipment, now we can start applying that same care package around our critical equipment.
Can you explain very quickly ABC? What is that exactly?
So an A is your most critical, okay? B has some criticality, and a C is not critical at all.
Okay, so if you have 20 machines, 20 different equipment, normally how many should you have in each bucket?
It's probably maybe 10 to 15% is A. And I would say probably the next 30% is B, and the rest of it is C equipment.
Okay, so if I'm that guy in the office, I should look for, if I have 20 equipment, I should look for my 2, 3 equipment that are really super critical, right? I should try to understand those ones they cannot stop. And by equipment, it cannot be the machine itself. It can, for instance, be a pump that it's just supplying to that machine, right?
That's correct. So that's the other thing we haven't really gotten to. I always talk equipment with bad actors. You wind up getting to the component level. What fails within that pump, right? Is it the impeller? Then you get into the question, is it sized right? Is it in the right application? Am I using the right material? Any one of those things could improve that pump's reliability. If I just had if I had it sized properly, right? A lot of times we want to make, here's one of those things. Yeah, we want to improve that production, right? But we increased the flow. Well, we've increased the flow. Well, can the system actually handle that increase in flow? We might be stressing the equipment to a point where it's really not designed to operate at that level.
I'm imagining my world, digital twin of my factory, and things becoming red, yellow, and green. But that requires a lot of data, right? To a component level. How do you normally start whenever you enter a production site? Where do you find that data?
I always say, I like the car analogy, and I'm going to come back to your question in a second, but I like the car analogy, right? I don't have to be a good mechanic to own a car. In fact, few of us are. I have to be a good owner operator of that piece of equipment, right? When the car's not driving right, it's making a noise that I don't like. I need to take it to the mechanic and give them a good troubleshoot. Say, hey, this is what's happening. This is, this is what I'm hearing. This is what I'm feeling, whatever. And it helps them troubleshoot to fix the problem. I see a lot of times in industry that operations don't talk to maintenance like that. Oh, it's broken, go fix it. And there's none of that troubleshooting, what RPM are you sensing this at? Or at what point does it get hot? We're not doing that troubleshooting stuff. So now getting back to your question, go on site, start digging through the data, and I go after bad actors first. I use that because that helps me explain that skill and to build that equipment, that care plan. Part of that care plan I didn't even get to is, does the operator have expectations? Can they troubleshoot? Can they help us? Can they write a good work order? And that good work order shouldn't be fix the light bulb, right? Because I can put the light bulb in, it still doesn't work. That means there's something else wrong, right? So what is the symptom? And if we write that work order to the symptom, that at least that gets us in the path of helping along the way.
You go through the work orders and try to understand what are we constantly repairing and fixing, right?
That's one thing you can do. Yeah, work orders is one thing, but if there's a production loss accounting, You almost have to blend the two. And the third thing is I like to send a survey out to people, because one piece of data can tell me one thing, another piece of data can tell me the other, but it might intersect somewhere. But if I can triangulate a little bit with operator and in their experience in a survey, I could probably triangulate, put all three of those together, and I could probably come up with, here's your 5 worst bad actors. This is what we can do. Now, again, going back, that gets me the skill. I want to develop that skill within the maintenance team. Okay, because that's where bad actors are going to house. They're going to be within the maintenance team. But then I started engaging my reliability team with them, right? And then I started engaging my operations team as well, because I want to stop that from being a bad actor. I want that loss to go away. And now we can start doing, mini Kaizens around that piece of equipment. We can do mini process improvements around that piece of equipment, and then measure on a quarterly basis. So it's kind of like, it's like losing weight, right? You're not going to lose the weight you want to lose overnight. Okay. Bad actors aren't going to go away overnight. But what I want to see is my weight reducing in a quarter. How much do I weigh today versus, 3 months ago? Same thing. If I'm looking at bad actors, how much did that bad actor's loss cost me this quarter? Now, do I see an improvement over what it cost me last quarter? And when I look at bad actors, I look at 5 running quarters. So I'm looking at a year and a quarter, right? To see, and I don't take it off until it's no longer in my top 5. One of the problems I do see is companies will tag 10, 20 bad actors and they expect they're going to get fixed in a week. It's not going to happen. Pick 5, put the right effort around those 5, and in a quarter, did those 5 drop far enough that something else has come up, right? Hopefully the impact of the next 5 is less than the impact of the previous 5. That shows your program is starting to work. You're seeing less impact to your costs.
I know that from our previous conversation, you also explained to me it's not just the shift handover meeting that it's crucial. It's also whenever you have an equipment handover. So equipment broke down, maintenance got involved, and there's always this tension, let's call it, between production and maintenance on who's the fault of that breakdown. And then when you restart, how much was downtime? What is it on maintenance side? What is it on production side? And then you even brought in the engineering team that also might be involved. So how should we manage machine breakdowns and handovers?
Right. You just said it though. Just for a second, it's that struggle, maintenance and operations, right? Maintenance never fixes it. Operations never gives it to us so we can fix it, right? Yeah. No, that handoff's really important. So part of that handoff is the operator shouldn't walk away from that piece of equipment when maintenance is out there to fix it, okay? Because it's kind of defeating for the maintenance team that operations shows no ownership of it, okay? So operators have to be out there. They've got to, again, give them that simple troubleshooting. This is what happened, or this is the last sound I heard, or this is the last temperature we had, or whatever. And it should point them in a little bit of troubleshooting help. Then when maintenance does fix it, they should turn it over to operations. And, in an ideal situation, operations is able to test that piece of equipment. Yeah, it's running. It's great. A lot of times where maintenance will complete the repair, we'll clear the lockout tag out, but we don't operate that piece of equipment. And then when we go to operate it, it doesn't work. And then it's an emergency again. So, that part of that handoff must be some type of operational test of that piece of equipment to make sure that everybody's happy on both sides.
Do you normally record it? Do you put it into paper? Or is it just an informal handover?
One company that I was doing, again, another global rollout with, we actually added it to the clearing of the tags, that we did an operational test, and both parties signed it, that they saw it. And it worked. Yeah, there was a global rollout with another chemical company many years ago, about the same time you and I met each other. We put that onto the lockout tag out when we cleared out those tags. And then the other thing is, one of the things that I did at a previous company, maybe it was about the time I was working with you, I made these big orange signs and I hung them at the bad actor. And I said, this is a bad actor. This is bad actor number 1. This is bad actor number 2, whatever. And I'd explain why I was a bad actor right there at that piece of equipment. The expectation was that it was added to the operator rounds. If the operators, and I told the operators, hey, you own this bad actor. You're going to help us get rid of it. we don't want this sign in your department anymore. The maintenance guys that had responsibility in that area, I said, you own that bad actor. You own it with that operator. You guys are going to make that bad actor go away. And we'd have bad actor meetings. We'd add them to our production loss accounting meetings.
So you would make it very visual whenever you would go beyond on that production side. It would be very visual to bad actors that you have identified. And you do a little bit of machine shaming to them. Poor machine.
I guess you could say there was some shaming there, but I guess you could say it's a shame, but I think it's more of a competition, right? Those operators don't want it. They don't want to have that there. And if it's still a bad actor next quarter, but I moved it from number 1 to number 3, that's a success. So I just don't want it to be number 1, for months on end.
Let me ask you, you were a superintendent previous to starting in your consultancy role. Does that help, being on the boots of a plant superintendent and understanding the struggles? How do you advise consultants? Should they go be first an operator, run a line, run a production site, a shift, and then move into consultancy, or the other way around? You should see the world a little bit, understand different ways of working, and then find a nest where you can grow.
So my experience, I never knew I was going to be a consultant. That wasn't even I didn't even know it was a job, to be honest with you. I just figured after the Navy, I got an industry. I figured that's what everybody did. My dad was in industry for years, so I figured that's what I'm going to do too. And I think it does help. I get a lot of junior consultants that join the company, and part of me really wants to teach them and help them through it, because coming out of college, if you're 22 years old and you go into consult, nobody's going to take you seriously. Your hair's not gray enough yet, and you don't have any real life experiences as far as that industry goes. So often they do a lot of analytical work. They start out there, but they don't know why they're doing it. So I like to explain to them why we're doing it. So, and I like to do that training, and then I like to do it with them and help them. I do think over time, I've worked with consultants that have never been in industry, and they're great people. I think being in industry gives you a bit of a leg up because, if you have the luck to consult in the industry that you're familiar with, you can already talk the language on day one. Sometimes you don't. You have to learn the language through data, through talking to people. Consultants in my world are not suited at sitting at a desk. They really need to be out in the shop floor. They have to ask questions. I had a mining project many, many years ago, and I was asked to help develop that project manager to run the project. And I set up a walkabout time or a Gemba time on his meeting, on his teams. And he asked me, he says, "But what's this meeting for?" I say, "We're going to go and grab the mine manager at that time every day, and we're going to go for a walk." And why? I said, because he needs to see that we're active, and the people in the mine, it would be really good for them to see their mine manager walking around. Even though it was passive management, just having them out there and being able to talk to the people and field questions and getting out there really helped. So consultants need to be out on the floor.
And that's a little bit how you started in the Navy, right? How were those first days there? You explained that to me too, right?
Yeah. That's kind of funny. You bring that up too. So my first day as an engineering officer, because I figured I'd want to be an engineering officer. I figured it would help me out in life after the Navy. So I had a Master Chief Petty Officer. He was the engineering officer of the watch. And he said, "Ensign, come here." He grabbed my hand and put it out of a valve on the steam line. And he says, "Ensign, the steam goes in that direction. I want you to draw out our steam system. Every valve, every pump, every whatever. I want you to write down every temperature and pressure you see. And then when you come back to this valve, you're done. And then you're going to show me through it. You're going to show me your drawing. You're going to walk me through it. And then we'll have an oral board with the engineer that you know the system." So for the next 3 days, that's what I did. I traced this thing all around engineering space and drew it out. And then he said, "Great." And we got the oral board done with the engineering officer. And he says, "Well, you're not done." And he took me downstairs and says, here's this valve. I want you to figure this out. So basically all the main steam, the auxiliary steam, the lube oil system, the fuel system. I learned the condensate return. I learned all that. So I think it was really important to do that and to ask people and talk to people. When I'm a consultant and I'm in an industry I don't know anything, I need to walk around. I need to ask questions. I need to kind of follow the process and understand it. I was with a food company last year, and they had a bunch of new IEs, industrial engineers. She had only been with the company for 2 or 3 months when I showed up, and she happened to be in the same area that I was consulting in. And I just saw her as a young consultant, right? She's an IE. So I walked her through it. And then the IE leader said to me, Bob, I really appreciate you doing that with her. Why do you do this? I said, well, she's in my area and she's going to be in my area. I'm going to make her useful. And I want her to be more useful for you. And I told her, I said, anytime you have a new IE, you should tell them you don't want to see them for 3 weeks, that they need to be out on the floor. They need to be asking questions. They need to understand the process. And then tell them, give them the expectation that in 3 weeks from now, you're going to tell me how it works and where our problems are, where our bottlenecks are. And she liked it. So, and again, another person, it's only been a year, but I'm not a big fan of LinkedIn, but it's kind of cool when people that you've worked with in the past, they want to continue that conversation. They want to talk to you. That's awesome.
So you guys keep in touch?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, almost. In fact, the manager in that area, he's a big hockey guy. I'm a big hockey guy. So we talk hockey at least once a week via text. The young IE is getting married in September. So I've got that discussion going on. And the IE manager's always asking me questions too. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Hey, Bob, if you allow me to shake things up a little bit, I would love to move to a short segment, which we call Press and Guess. And the whole idea is, it's all about
I think you've already done it to me a bit. I mean,
no, we're just starting. So first one, what is more stressful, a Navy drill or a night shift breakdown?
I would say a night shift breakdown, because the Navy train like they fight and they fight like they train. So you have expectations of where things are, who's in control, what's going on, and you kind of understand everybody knows their expectations. A nighttime failure at a plant is always new. It's always something different. It's completely unplanned for. And people don't know who's in control. People don't know what the right thing is. Now, there might be some immediate casualty corrections that they can put in place, but no, I think that 2:00 in the morning call from a plant is a whole lot worse than the Navy drill. Navy drill, you kind of know because you're always doing it. You're always training.
A normal routine, right? How would you describe a perfect shop floor?
The way I say to people is, I'm a consultant. I'm an alien. I've never been on your shop floor before, but I know the basics of English, or I know the basics of visual management. So I should be able to walk on your floor, and without asking a question, I should be able to know how everything is producing, how we're manufacturing. There should be really good communication, whether it's visual or shift turnovers or, communications between different departments. It has to be active. If you're doing those things, I think you have a good shop floor.
And what is the hardest part of consulting? The travel or the reports?
The hardest part is the travel. Doing the reports isn't really that bad. You get into a routine, especially once you know what the client expectations are, what your project expectations are, reports are kind of easy. It's the travel. And the crazy thing about travel is you never get delayed going to work. You never get canceled going to work. I would say most of my delays and cancellations are coming home. So you already have a short weekend to begin with, and then you get impacted by another 6, 7, 12 hours or whatever. Yes.
Travel sucks. In the beginning, you think it's so sexy, and you go to hotels and you fly around and you go into restaurants. And week 3, you just want to kill yourself. Oops, maybe that's not a good expression.
But you can settle into a routine. And again, those reports are just routine. It's not a big deal.
What's harder to find, a hidden submarine or a hidden bottleneck in a complex supply chain?
Oh, hidden submarine.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
Okay. And what is harder, 100 push-ups or 5 client meetings in a row?
5 client meetings in a row. I could probably still do 100 push-ups. I do them every day anyways, so that's not a big deal. It's 5 client meetings, especially in the beginning of a project when they're all really bad. There are clients out there that say, oh, we got great meetings. And then you go in there and you're like, no, you don't. And it's horrible. Yeah, meetings are bad. And that's our job. And the crazy thing is our job is to maybe add meetings, but we want to add more efficient meetings that are less time. So overall, your meeting time should go down.
Yeah, but that's a balance that is really critical, right? Because you need meetings, you need changeover meetings, shift meetings, that you said, and all of that. And at the same time, those are the hardest part of the job, right? Awesome. Hey, thank you very much for playing along. Before I let you go, I need to touch a little bit on the future, on digital. AI and so forth. I would love to hear your insights on that. I know that we are seeing the world adopting more AI solutions, connected shop floor tools, and so forth. How do you see that whenever you enter a production site? Do you see that factories are starting to have information in real time, or are we still using a rear view mirror approach?
Again, it's amazing you brought that question up because I've been reading the news a lot the last 2 weeks, and the advancements in AI have just gone crazy. I'm still a bit apprehensive. I look at it as I don't want to rely on AI. I don't want people to rely on it because I think there's a real possibility that we're going to forget how to be curious and learn stuff on our own. And I don't think AI is really ever going to have the human experience. I don't care how good it gets. I don't think it's ever going to be self-aware. It might say, "Oh, I'm self-aware," but is it? It's a machine. So I don't think you replicate the human experience bit. So a couple things here with AI. One is if it's pure and the person that is actually inputting data is inputting data that is specific and pure, not corrupted, which I don't know how well that can be, then I'm going to trust that AI a little bit more. Where AI scares me is if it's being put in with bad data that's been contaminated with an agenda, then it's going to give you bad information.
That's exactly my next question to you is sometimes I feel like when I hear these conversations about AI, it looks like a little bit of a sci-fi movie when I go back into a production site and I see people with paper, not understanding what their bad actors are, not having that information available. And then suddenly we're talking about lights out factories, fully automized and digitalized and so forth. Do you already have the foundation of data available in order to build on that intelligence layer?
That's part of our job too, right? As consultants, are we measuring the right thing for that business? And a lot of times I'm not sure what they're measuring. We have to put the right KPI tree in. So we might have to build data they don't have, or we might have to help them build that data set. So yeah, down the road, if you can, again, keep the data pure and make sure it's good data, you can have a good AI for them. My fear around the whole AI is that I really don't want the AI making real decisions without a human interface. So it might say, "Oh, here's a couple parameters are out of touch or out of base. Let's shut the equipment down." Well, it might be the right decision, but I really want the human to shut that equipment down first. Make sure we're shutting it down in the proper sequence.
Bob, I promise I don't want to get too political. Allow me just to ask you this. When you look at the current geopolitical tensions in the air, and from my understanding, we still have a very centralized global manufacturing supply chains. Do you think that the future will be smaller plants, more local plants? Countries will be a little bit more independent on their supply chains?
Right now, what's the big thing going on right now is rare earth materials. Not every country has them. Countries have to rely on other countries for those. And then somebody has to refine them, right? And then it has to get out into the global supply chain. I really think that if you have a free, open, true trade, it has to be free, real trade. It can't benefit one or the other. It has to be real. I think if you had that, you'll have good agreements, or you should have good agreements in the countries. And I think it only makes the global supply chain better. But it has to be free trade. And I think that's where we kind of fall down right now, because there's protectionism. I mean, we're seeing it right now, right? But there's always been certain amounts of protectionism. If we could let those walls go down a little bit, I think it would improve. And I think the current stance in the United States is that, hey, if you're going to charge us, we're going to charge you back, right? So don't charge us, and we're not going to charge you. And that's how we're going to get to a free trade agreement, I think.
Okay. So you see this more a political play than actually changing the whole way of us operating with each other in terms of supply chain and manufacturing.
I've been fortunate enough to be all over the world. I've seen the same. I think I've had this discussion with you in the past, right? You go to dinner, it doesn't matter what country you're in, you see the same families. You see the same moms, the same dads, same grandparents talking about the same problems in their lives. And they all want one thing. They want the best thing for the next generation. They all do. Okay. And you've got 99.999% of the world just wants a better life for their kids. And then you got 0.0001% of the world just wants to screw it up for everybody else. We really got to make it more painful for those people. So they join the right side of the world. But, I want Portugal to be the best Portugal could be. I want Spain to be the best Spain it could be. I want France to be the best France it could be. Okay, I want America to obviously be the best America it can be.
I would love just to, and I promise it's the last question.
No, I don't care.
It's,
I'm
it's just,
enjoying this. It's a good. I almost finished my coffee. It's cold now.
yeah. You haven't finished it yet? Oh, okay. But just you touch on that you traveled a little bit throughout the whole world, and you have seen factories changing a little bit, hopefully throughout these years. And now, whenever you see this new generation coming in, what do you think is the number one mindset that they should have in order to survive what's coming up in this digital revolution, and also in order to strive in this world, in this manufacturing world which we love so much?
It goes back to our earlier conversation. I'm fresh out of college and I go in industry. This is not where I need to be. Sitting at my desk is not where I need to be. I can't lose my curiosity. I cannot stop improving myself. I don't know if this even applies here, but in the Navy, to be the captain of the ship, you have to have experiences in every department on the ship. Big one being engineering. You can't be a commanding officer unless you've been an engineering officer. So when I got in industry, I saw the commanding officer as the plant manager, right? Or the plant manager as the commanding officer. I figured, okay, to be a successful plant manager, I have to have a job in every department and be good at it before I can be the plant manager. So I was trying to work on getting that ticket punched. So what I want to say with the new world, right? You get into an industry you like, or you get into a job you like. It doesn't have to be industry. It could be anything. You just can't sit there and say, okay, well, I'm here. You can't lose that curiosity. Don't let the machine figure it out for you. Okay? Maybe 100 years from now, maybe even 50 years from now, things would change to a point where you can actually replicate the human experience, but I don't think you can right now. And I think that's something the individual cannot forget. One thing I do find, I know this is me being the old boomer guy, right? I'm not a boomer. I'm a Gen Xer. But the thing is that the younger generation, you got time. You got time. You don't have to be the plant manager tomorrow. You don't have to be the one with all the answers. Just learn, take your time, enjoy it. I think I might have told you this once before. Just because you become the officer of the deck on the ship doesn't mean you're the best officer of the deck the ship is the Navy's ever had. It just means that you've learned enough to be competent, and you learn enough for the captain to have confidence in your ability. Every time you're the officer of the deck, there's a completely new experience. And you're going to hopefully be right more times than you're wrong. But when you're wrong, what can you learn from it? And how do you improve the next time? And even when you're good, sometimes you're more lucky than good, but sometimes when you're good, what did you learn from it? And how do you get to be good again? So don't rush it. Just learn, get the experiences, make that digital stuff work for you. Don't work for that digital stuff.
That's a great way to finish, Bob. Thank you very much. It was really a pleasure having you.
I'm kind of excited to see how that comes out. I really am.
Join our Connected Shopfloor communities on LinkedIn and Reddit. And subscribe our channels.